On today's Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants kicked off their offseason program. What did the coaches and players have to say? I have some takeaways for you, and that's coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, P-Train, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network. Oh, so happy to have you with us. And of course, a shout out to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. You are all appreciated and loved by yours truly. And thank you for spending part of your day here with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's episode, the Giants went back to work on Tax Day. That's right. Tax Day was the start of the NFL offseason program for teams with head coaches that were returning from last year. So it was a busy media day for us in the media, in that we heard from head coach Brian Daboll. We heard from the three coordinators. We even heard from three players, select players, and those were Daniel Jones, Andrew Thomas, Bobby Okereke. So there was a lot of content to come out today, but I'm going to give you three key takeaways that that resonated with me for one reason or another. And I want to talk about them on today's show. So we're going to go down the list. We're going to start off with a question that I had, and that is, how much will the offense change with Daniel Jones coming off of injury? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then in segment 2, Daniel Jones was asked if he is the best quarterback for this team, if he is healthy. We know his answer. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that his answer was yes. But I'm going to tell you why he's probably right. I know that sounds surprising, but I'm going to tell you why he's probably right. You won't want to miss that. And no, I haven't changed my mind on the quarterbacks, but stick around. You'll see what I mean. And then finally, Brian Daboll mentioned a change that was made that I think flew under the radar, but which I think is very, very important for a Giants team that just has been wrecked by injuries year after year after year. So we'll talk about that as well. That'll be in segment 3. So again, welcome on in. Got a lot to go through as usual. So let's get started. Now, I mentioned the first bullet point is, how much will the offense change? And let me give you a little background as to, what the question was. I asked a question actually today of Mike Kafka. And the reason why I asked it is because Daniel Jones, as we all know, is penciled in to be the starter once healthy. However, he is recovering, as everybody knows, from the torn ACL. He also has had the neck injuries, 2 neck injuries in the last 3 years. And today, Jones actually clarified what he had last season was just a stinger. And it was bad enough to obviously, knock him out of, I think it was 3 games last season. So not so much the neck injuries. I guess that's part of it. But I was curious because when I was writing an article for Giants Country, I said, here's why the Giants absolutely have to draft a quarterback. And, say what you want about Daniel Jones and his ability to lead or play or how good he is or how bad he is. For me, the number one concern has always been that injury history. And the more injuries that he racks up, the more I would say he's probably not someone you want to rely on long term. So that got me thinking. All right. So he's coming off the ACL. Now, science has come a long way. There is no reason to think that he won't recover and be able to move around and do all the things he needs to do. But it has also been said that an ACL injury, that a player can take 18 to 24 months to really get all the way back. So with that and also with his neck injury, whether it be a disc issue, whether it be a stinger, whatever, he's had in the past, I got to wondering, would the Giants potentially alter what they do on offense so long as he's in there? All right. So, in other words, would they consider not calling as many design runs for him? Would they consider, having him work out of the shotgun more often to give him a head start on the drop back to get the ball out of his hand? What could they do to protect him? And I wrote an article about that. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, look, Daniel Jones is hardwired to play at risk, meaning he'll throw his body around, he'll try and pick up that extra yard or two. And if it means he takes a hit, he takes a hit. So it's almost like a reckless type of attitude, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you have a growing injury history, you have to kind of learn when to put your body on the line and when to reel it back and live to see the next down. And I don't think Daniel Jones has learned that. So I asked Mike Kafka, my question to him was pretty much, how much do you have to change the offense if, Daniel's going to be your guy? Do you maybe scale back some of the runs? Do you maybe do things a little differently given the injury history that he has and, not wanting to put him out there? Now, obviously, if he is out there, he's been cleared and the medical staff has nothing to be, worried about. But still, one wrong hit could potentially end his career. All right. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't wish anything bad on the young man, but it's a reality now given his history. So I asked Kafka if they changed everything up. And of course, Kafka, in typical Kafka fashion, didn't give me a direct answer. He basically said, that offensive game plans is all 11 and, it's all about putting guys in the right position to succeed, et cetera, et cetera. So I followed up with him and I said to him, yeah, but, you take a guy like Daniel for whom, you've leaned on some of his athletic abilities as a runner. Do you maybe scale some of those back and distribute some of those runs to, I don't know, some of the running backs, for example? So instead of calling for an RPO or design run, do you scale those back and give it to other players? And Kafka, of course, was like, well, we take each week as it comes and we'll put guys in the best position and do what it takes to win, et cetera, et cetera. Don't you just love when they don't answer your question? But anyway, he didn't answer the question, but I would not be surprised if when Daniel Jones is clear to play, that the Giants maybe scale a few things back. All right. You don't want, for example, to be calling for quarterback sneaks for a guy that has, a neck issue. And even though Jones said that his neck issue is 100%, it's actually no longer an issue. It's a history now that you have to be concerned with. So you have that. And then you have, of course, the ACL. Now, fortunately for Jones, that was really the only injury in his knee. It's been stitched back together, should be able to hold up. But you know what? Sometimes guys do suffer a relapse. So do you want to really be running Daniel Jones out there a lot? Or do you want to just have him use his mobility to escape pressure and get out of the pocket and roll around in the pocket? These are all questions that I think are valid that the Giants coaching staff needs to ask themselves if they are indeed going to run it back with Daniel Jones. And of course, it does look like they are going to run it back with Daniel Jones this year once he is healthy. And, as I've discussed before, that kind of makes sense. Now, in the next segment, I'm going to get into it a little bit more. And I'm also going to tell you why Daniel Jones's opinion of himself as being the best quarterback, if healthy, is correct. And I'm going to explain to you why that has nothing to do with what the Giants do moving forward. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. And if you're thinking about giving therapy a try, why not check out BetterHelp? It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find your assigned therapist isn't a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm going to do a show in which I go down and basically assess the roster, which each position, where does it stand? And then I'm going to probably give you one player from the draft pool that I would absolutely love for the Giants to add, if at all possible. So I'm going to go through that exercise a little later on this week, maybe as soon as tomorrow. We'll see. I'm still also working on another guest for the show. So, that'll be something coming up. And then Joe Shane is scheduled to speak to the media on Thursday. So the plan there will be for Thursday's show. I'm going to hear what Shane has to say, do whatever writing I have to do, get back to my little home studio here and do a takeaway podcast on that as well. I've got questions I hope that, I can get in that he'll be able to answer. So that's what's coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thursday, of course, marks 1 week until the draft. And I know a lot of you have written in and said, I'm tired of these mock drafts. I'm tired of these rumors. I'm tired of the speculation. Let's just get the draft and get it over with. I'm with you guys. I am definitely with you because there have been so many smokescreens, so many rumors, the mock drafts. I'm mock draft out. And I'm sure a lot of you are as well. So anyway, that's what's coming up. Let's get back to today's show. As you would expect, the reporters were interested in Daniel Jones's rehab. Where was he? How was he feeling? What was the goal? What's the timeline, et cetera, et cetera. Jones told everybody that he is now able to move around and do some throwing, not full blast, but he's able, whereas a month or two ago, he was basically throwing from a stationary position. Now he's able to be a little bit more on the move, which is good. And he, of course, has his eyes set on being fully ready for the start of training camp. He also hopes to be able to do some individual drills during the spring OTAs, which start next month. Still a ways to go before, that's determined, but that's what he's hoping for. Now, there was one thing that Jones said that I think a lot of people were like, what? And the question was asked of Jones by one of my colleagues. Does he think that if he's healthy, he is the best quarterback for this team? And his answer, as you would expect, was yes. Yes, I do. Now, some of you are saying, well, what else was he supposed to say? No, I'm not the best quarterback. But you know what? In reality, there is some truth to his answer, and he's not wrong. Now, before y'all jump down my throat and take the comment section and say, what are you backtracking on drafting a quarterback? No, that's not what I'm doing. I still think the Giants should dip into that talent pool because Daniel Jones's injury history is a concern. All right. I'm sorry. It is a concern. And I pointed out many times also that if the Giants were totally convinced that Jones was the guy moving forward, there would not be an escape hatch in his contract midway through, which, by the way, is coinciding with the fact that this is a super deep draft class for the position. So just too many signs there that suggest that a quarterback could very well be in play. I don't think it'll be a first round, but I think it could be, second round for sure, or maybe even they trade back into the first round. But anyway, here's why I think Daniel Jones was correct in saying that he is the best option on the roster as of right now. Okay, as of right now, this is important. So you've got Drew Lock, who came over from Seattle, needs to learn the system. Now, Drew Lock might have a better skill set. He might be, a little bit more open to throwing the ball down the field. He might be better at making post-snap reads, but he's got to learn the system. And he will. But, will he be able to outplay Daniel Jones? Well, some might say he might, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a competition in the true sense of the word between Drew Lock and Daniel Jones. Then you've got Tommy DeVito. DeVito, we all know his story. Last year he came in and for 3 games, he was like the savior, winning games for the Giants and just having some success. And then the bottom fell out. He got benched midway through this New Orleans game in favor of Tyrod Taylor, and the Giants really didn't look back at that point. Tommy DeVito, I do believe is going to get an opportunity to compete. But what's going to be interesting is what happens if the Giants do draft a quarterback, which I believe they will. What happens to DeVito at that point? Do you try and put him back on the practice squad? Do you look to move him? Do you release him? What do you do? So that's what, one of the things I'm curious to see what happens. So basically, folks, as of right now, is Daniel Jones the best option to start based on his experience in the system, based on, the fact that he's been around and knows the Giants and, what they expect? Yes, he is the best option right now. Now, what happens if the Giants do draft a quarterback and that quarterback is one of the top 4, a Jaden Daniels or a JJ McCarthy or, a Drake May? Well, that rookie still has to learn the system. That rookie still has to get acclimated to life in the NFL. So until all that happens, Daniel Jones, by default, is still the best option. Is he the long-term option? I don't think he is. That, of course, remains to be seen. But, in terms of best option, given the circumstances, given what, the talent around him will be facing as far as obstacles and whatnot, yeah, you can definitely say that Jones is correct in saying that he was the best, the best option. And I know some of you are saying, well, Pat, what did you expect him to say? Did you expect him to sit there and say, no, I don't think I'm the best option? No, you're right. I didn't expect him to say that at all. But that being said, Jones is right now, I'm talking as of April 15th, the best option on that roster. And it's not even close. Now, again, once Drew Lock learns the system, maybe he outplays Daniel Jones. But then, I don't know that there's going to necessarily be a competition. And this is something that the Giants need to be careful of because we saw this back in 2004 when the Giants added Eli Manning. All right. If you remember back then, they had Kerry Collins on the roster. And Kerry Collins was the starter. And, the year before, and he was backed up by, I believe, Jason Garrett. And then when the Giants were looking to acquire Eli Manning, Kerry Collins did not want to go and become a mentor to Eli Manning. He basically didn't want to babysit him. And he went and requested his release. Now, the Giants, of course, went and they got Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner kept the seat warm until Eli Manning was ready to play midway through that season. Now, as far as modern times, what would happen with the Giants? Well, I don't think Daniel Jones would be, egotistical enough if the Giants were to draft a quarterback, in the first round or, whether it be high or in the bottom of the first round or even the second round. I don't think Daniel Jones would turn around and be a jerk about it and not want to help or anything like that. Basically, the Giants can't cut him. I mean, we know the financials involved, and the Giants are not going to be able to cut him because it would just be, a ridiculous cap hit. So that being said, we would have to obviously see if the Giants add a quarterback, who that quarterback is. Does he have a better basic skill set? And how does he stack up in this offense? Because that's the other thing. A lot of these quarterbacks are not playing in the exact same offense as what the Giants are running. They might be playing in a variation, but until you get them on the field and you see how much they've learned, how quickly they've learned, what kind of mistakes are they making? Are they correctable? Are they concerning? Right now, I mean, Daniel is the best option. Like it or not, let's give the guy props. He is the best option given the factors that I've mentioned. Is he the best option moving forward? Probably not. Again, the injury history for me is a problem. And that is why I continue to bang the drum for the Giants to take a quarterback in this draft so that they don't find themselves caught in a funky situation where now all of a sudden they passed on all the quarterback talent. And oh, what do we do if Daniel gets hurt again? I think Joe Shane knows that. I think Brian Dable knows that. And I also think that, if they do bring in a quarterback, a young quarterback, I realize that, fans are going to be screaming the second Daniel Jones throws an interception or loses a game or does something stupid that, fans don't like, whether it be missing a pass or whatever. Fans will be screaming for the young quarterback. But you got to trust that Dable will have that under control and that they won't make the mistake that was made with Daniel, which was basically rushing the young guy out before he was ready. So, quarterback situation, that's how I kind of see it playing it out. I do think a young quarterback is coming. I don't think it'll be at 6, but the Giants have been known to do, surprising things. So maybe they pull it off and maybe something else happens. We'll have to see how it all plays out. All right, coming up next, the Giants made a subtle but very important change that Brian Dable mentioned to their operations. I'm going to tell you what that change is and why it's so important right after this. Hey, Giant fans, let me tell you about my fantastic experience with our friends over at Game Time. So, as you guys probably know, I'm a big Kiss fan, and there was just no way that I was going to miss the band's final performances last winter. But as you can probably imagine, tickets were very hard to come by, let alone affordable seats. Well, thanks to Game Time, I not only found the tickets I wanted, I got them for less than I would have had to have paid on other sites. I even got a set on a discounted Game Time flash deal. And how cool was it that I got to see what my view of the stage would look like before I made the commitment to buy? These are just a few of the reasons why I trust Game Time when it comes to getting tickets to my favorite concerts, shows, and sporting events. And I'll give you one more reason to trust them: event cancellation protection. Last winter, Kiss's frontman was battling the flu, and there were doubts as to whether or not those last shows would even go on. But I had nothing to worry about thanks to Game Time's event cancellation protection. So you're going to love Game Time, folks, just as much as I do. Their prices are so competitive that if you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% off the difference. So go on, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and it was a busy, busy day over at 1925 Giants Drive. The players back in the building for the start of the offseason program. Of course, right now, first 2 weeks are strength and conditioning. It ends next week, right before the draft, and the players will be off. Then, of course, we'll have the draft, and then they come back. And it will be phase 2, which will mean the players will be allowed to work with their position coaches. Then they have off for the rookie mini camp, which is coming up on May 10th and 11th. And then we get into OTAs, and that's when the media will be back in the building. We'll be able to see some of the OTAs and some of the new changes and whatnot on special teams, on defense, even on offense. So a lot of football coming up in this spring period. And it all got started today. So we are running down some of the top takeaways from the video conference calls. And this next one, I think, is flying under the radar by a lot of people, but it's very important in my opinion. Now, as we all know, the Giants have historically led the league these last several years in injuries. Not a stat you want to be leading the league in. And a lot of people are like, what is it that they're doing or not doing that they are so injured all the time? People are like, well, the Jets play on the MetLife Stadium surface and they're not injured. So what are the Giants doing or not doing to to have this lead that they're in seemingly every year. Well, they've investigated it. I don't know exactly what their findings are, but the first step that they took, obviously, was to rehire Aaron Wellman, who is now the executive director of player performance, which means Aaron Wellman is in charge of everything. He is strength and conditioning, stretching, all that stuff. And Brian Dable, when he spoke to the media, dropped the little nugget that I thought was worth mentioning. He said that the weight room was renovated, it was reorganized to make better use of their space. And he also mentioned that a piece of turf was put into the weight room. And that caught my eye, or I should say, that raised my antenna, if you will. Now, why, do you ask? Because here's a theory that I've long had. The Giants, when they're going through their off-season program, and even during the week when they're in the weight room and they're training, they're working basically on a carpeted rug, which, may or may not be padded. I've never, it's been a while since I've been in the weight room at the facility, so I don't even remember if it was padded or not. There's also some hardwood floors, if I remember correctly, in the weight room. Now, I am not an exercise scientist, but this is just a theory I have based on my own exercising that I do. I find that when I do certain exercises on carpet versus grass versus concrete, I feel differently, in my legs and my lower back. I just feel differently. It could be the same movement I'm doing, the same number of reps, the same pace, everything. But depending on the surface I'm standing on, I feel differently. So by adding this carpet, if you will, or this piece of turf, which I presume is the same turf over at MetLife Stadium, now you're giving the players an opportunity to go through football motions and weightlifting and whatever else that they need to do to get ready, to do it on the same surface that they're going to be playing on. So this way, maybe there's not as much soreness. Maybe there's not as much tightness that leads to, the calves and the groins and the hamstrings and all that stuff. I just thought that that was a really, really, interesting nugget that Dable dropped. And, he, like I said, he mentioned the renovation of the weight room. So I don't know, what exactly that means, if they, reconfigured the space. It sounded like that's what they did based on what Dable said. I don't know if they went to a different approach. I think in the past they've used free weights a little bit more as opposed to machines. Have they gone back to machines? I don't know. I'd have to go in and see it for myself to let you know. But it just sounds like Aaron Wellman came in. And remember, when Aaron Wellman was here the first time, the Giants' injury situation got under control. It was actually probably the best it's been in quite some time. And then, of course, he left to go to Indiana, and then things kind of skyrocketed out of control. Part of that was also due to different philosophies coming in from different strength and conditioning coordinators who were being hired by different head coaches. But it just seems like now, just run it through with Aaron Wellman, who has had success, who's one of the best in the business, and just see if that maybe cuts down on some of the injuries that they have, particularly the soft tissue injuries, which have been such a problem for this team for the longest time. So that was for me, that was a big takeaway. We'll find out obviously in the coming years, or the coming months, I should say, and the years, if that has a bearing on what the Giants' injury situation looks like. But look, they had to do something. And at this point, could that hurt? Probably not, but we'll see if it does make a difference. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here. Be sure to keep it here all week long. Again, got more content coming up. We've got Joe Shane's presser points coming up. I'm working on a guest for you this week, so plenty to keep you engaged, and I hope to see you here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Have a good one, everybody.